Good morning. It is Sunday, October the 31st, 2021, and the title of the message today is Play Acting. We'll be looking specifically at Luke chapter 12, verses 1 through 7. Today happens to be a day that most associate with children dressing up in costumes and going house to house in their neighborhoods, exclaiming trick or treat to those who answer their doors in order to receive some free tidbits of one kind or another. I, personally, always hoped for name brand candy, not the cheap, chalky stuff that tasted terrible, or the homemade but almost inedible goodies that really weren't that good. Fortunately, I never had to say, "I got a rock," like poor Charlie Brown. And while I could quite easily give an entire message about the potential negative issues with many of the other traditions and practices associated with this day, I want to focus on the lessons we might learn related to pretending to be someone we are not. As I mentioned before, one of my favorite costumes from my childhood was a homemade Superman costume my mother made for me. I can remember wearing my Superman shirt so much that I wore holes in it, and the attached cape eventually became shredded and all but disintegrated. I think it's safe to say that I really liked imagining I was Superman. I don't remember many of my other costumes with as much fondness or detail as I do my Superman outfit. Most of the rest were store-bought, worn once or twice, and then discarded, as they were meant to be disposable. However, I can say that it was always fun pretending to be someone else for a little while. I believe what makes doing so attractive to people of all ages, not just kids, is that dressing up as someone else, wearing a costume and a mask, makes us feel like we can say things, do things, and act in ways we would not normally do. And there can be little or no harm in doing so, provided we don't say anything, do anything, or act in a way that crosses the line into inappropriate, illegal, or immoral behavior. But there can be a negative side to pretending to being someone that we are not. This is especially true for Christians. If we have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, we are called to be authentic, good examples, and to not be embarrassed about who we are and what we believe. And if we are not real as followers of Christ, that disingenuousness can have a negative eternal impact on those around us, those to whom we may be the only witnesses of the gospel they will ever meet. Jesus knew the danger of his disciples putting on a false front. He knew they would be tempted to play a part, to put on a show, to grow too concerned about what others thought. And he gave them, and us by extension, some specific instruction on the matter. First, Jesus warns us against the sin of hypocrisy. Reading from Luke chapter 12, verse 1. Meanwhile, the scriptures say, a crowd of many thousands came together, so that they were trampling on one another. He, being Jesus, began to say to his disciples, first, be on your guard against the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. It's no accident that Jesus shared these words of warning with his disciples at a moment when a crowd of many thousands were surrounding them. Picture in your mind a large number of fans or supporters pressing in close to see a famous celebrity or high-ranking politician in our modern world. Now imagine being in the inner circle of that well-known person. To some extent, you become a celebrity in your own right because of your close association with someone who is a superstar in the eyes of others. And with that privileged position comes many problems and the potential for many temptations. In the case of Jesus's disciples, I believe he was concerned primarily about two things. The first being his disciples would succumb to the temptation of desiring to gain popularity by seeking to please the crowds. And second, they would succumb to the temptation of avoiding trouble by seeking to appease the Pharisees. Both of these pitfalls share a common theme, a concern about what other people think. Jesus uses the Pharisees themselves in his warning, as he clearly saw many of them for what they truly were, play actors putting on a performance so that others would hold them in high regard, even though in reality they were failed sinners just like everyone else. Jesus warned of the leaven or yeast that infected the Pharisees. Why yeast? Well, if you add a relatively small amount of it to a dough, it spreads quickly throughout, causing it to puff up and to swell. Pride achieves the same thing in a person. It quickly spreads within us, swells our opinion of ourselves, and its source is often the praise and adoration of other people. Second, Jesus warns us that all will be revealed. Continuing to read from Luke chapter 12, verses 2 and 3, Jesus' words. There is nothing covered that won't be uncovered, nothing hidden that won't be made known. In verse 3, therefore, whatever you have said in the dark will be heard in the light, and what you have whispered in an ear in private rooms will be proclaimed on the housetops. Is there anything you said or did this week, or any way you acted in the past few days, that would be embarrassing to you if I was able to play a video or audio recording of it here on the internet for everyone viewing this message to see and hear? Did you say it, maybe perhaps in confidence, with another person, or when no other person could hear? Did you do something in private that no other person, at least to your knowledge, knows you did? Did you act in such a way, perhaps to a stranger, that you aren't proud of in hindsight? I can tell you truthfully, I know I did. And the truth is, you each probably did as well. But we must remember, God sees, knows, and hears everything. And a day will come when our best efforts at acting like we're the people we're supposed to be and covering up what we don't want others to know will end. The curtain will fall, and the light of truth will come on, revealing everything. If we're false or fake, we may fool some people for a while, but the truth will come out. Who we are when we think no one is watching or listening reveals more truth to us about ourselves than many of us wish to admit. No matter how good or convincing my childhood costumes were, at some point I had to take them off and look at my real self in the mirror. Are you the Christian you should be this morning? Or are you guilty of playing spiritual dress up in an effort to fool others and perhaps yourself? Finally, Jesus warns us that we should fear God and not other people. Continuing to read from Luke chapter 12 with verse 4. Again, Jesus' words, I say to you, my friends, don't fear those who kill the body, and after that can do nothing more. But I will show you the one to fear. Fear him who has authority to throw people into hell after death. Yes, I say to you, this is the one to fear. Aren't 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies? Yet not one of them is forgotten in God's sight. Finally, with verse 7, indeed, the hairs of your head are all counted. Don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. Many self-proclaimed and self-professing Christians have a negative reaction to the notion of fearing God. For some reason, they don't think it is appropriate. But Jesus's words, printed conveniently in red so we don't miss that fact, tell us to do exactly that. So in the context of this verse, what does fear God mean? Well, let me explain it this way. There are many people in this world, some Christians included, who are very concerned with what other people think about them. They will go to great lengths to avoid being laughed at, embarrassed, or made fun of by someone else. They want to be liked and accepted by those that they have deemed worthy of impressing for one reason or another. They are willing to compromise, change who they are, and kowtow in order to gain support, approval, or the favor of others. Put simply, they are obsessed with how they are viewed by other people. So what does this have to do with fearing God? Well, people like the ones that I've just described obviously fear other people. They're not necessarily afraid of them in the sense that they pose a physical danger, but they do fear them nonetheless. They fear what they might say, do, or think. If you are a believer, you should hold no one in higher regard than your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. You and I should be obsessed with how he views us, not by how other people view us. Having Jesus pleased with us, with our words, thoughts, and actions, should be a motivating factor for each of us every day. You see, there's a big difference between being afraid of God and having a proper, respectful fear, as we've just talked about it, of him. In closing, I want to return to my Superman costume for just a moment. When I wore it, I pretended to be Superman, but I knew I really was not. And in truth, no one else thought I was Superman either. Who I really was under the costume was still evident. If you're acting the part of Christian this morning, more than being genuine, then don't fool yourself into believing you can keep up the act forever. Hypocrisy will always be revealed. Instead, fear God, show it by how you live your life, and become the real person God plans for you to be. Then and only then will you be a consistent and effective witness for your Lord and Savior. And you will have pleased the only person who really counts in all the universe. God bless you this week.